Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us once again. Today we'll be discussing Raymond Maines Shryock, better known to his Mexican Mafia carnales as Güero Shy. He has been a member of the Mariposa for 54 years. We will cover the beginning in 1970 with his transfer to the Dual Vocational Institution, where he was recruited into the ME, until his conviction and commitment to the feds in 1997. During this time, Güero Shy witnessed and participated in the evolution of the Mexican Mafia and, of course, all the murder and mayhem. But before we begin, a quick word from our sponsor. There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. Raymond Güero Shryock from Artesia was born on July the 16th, 1951. He was unique, being that he was a Caucasian member of a Chicano street gang, but he took the well-worn path of the Vato Locos down the road of the Vida Loca and ended up in the California Youth Authority. In July 1970, Güero Shy was transferred to the Dual Vocational Institution, better known as Gladiator School, after a conviction of assault with a deadly weapon in San Joaquin County. Unfortunately, the newspaper did not specifically name a facility, but the only facility in operation at the time was OH Close, which opened in 1966 and housed youth ranging in age from 14 to 24. In 1970, Richie Ruiz from Bakersfield and a founding member of La Famosa was being housed at DVI. In this year, he undertook the largest single recruitment in the history of the Mexican Mafia. Richie inducted 12 members, including Güero Shy, Alex Mofarel, Richard Babyboy Resendez, Martin Queto Vargas, Donald Stoney Galaz, Manuel Chapo Amaro, Richard Romy Galaviz, Raymond Chavo Perez, Ralph Pata Garcia, Raul Dagwood Vasquez, Daniel Spira Arriaga, and Arthur Artie Duran. Today, this is strictly forbidden to prevent a single member from surrounding themselves with a cadre of loyal soldiers and launching a power grab. Now it's more typical for a carnal to recruit one or two members during their career. On January the 30th, 1972, at 4:15 p.m. in the DVI North Corridor leading to the recreation yard and mess hall, a melee broke out between what Associate Superintendent John Hackert described as 20 Mexican Americans from Northern and Southern California. Furthermore, he said that this was the first disturbance of its kind. Up to this point, disturbances amongst Chicanos were not classified as North versus South, but just as disturbances amongst the Chicano population. Going forward, the battles would be described more and more often as battles between two distinct groups of Chicanos from Northern and Southern California. Güero Shy, always a frontline soldier, suffered a 5-inch laceration on his scalp behind his right ear and puncture wounds on his lower left back. Luis Salcido from Los Angeles suffered 3 puncture wounds in the chest and upper right shoulder. Both were admitted to the DVI hospital and described as being in satisfactory condition. 2 others suffered minor injuries and were treated and released from the hospital. 6 weapons made from screwdrivers, ladles, and bolts were found at the scene. After this incident, Güero Shy was transferred to San Quentin. On May the 30th, 1973, Edward Salino Lopez, a newly made Mexican Mafia member, better known as Green Eyes from Florencia, was found face down, fully clothed, with a towel covering his head in the shower at the west end of the San Quentin gym shortly before noon. He apparently died from a massive skull fracture, but was also stabbed and strangled in what was described as a gangland slaying. This was the first death of the year at San Quentin. Green Eyes was admitted to San Quentin from San Diego on May the 8th, 1972, to serve 2 consecutive 5-to-life terms for first-degree robbery with use of a firearm. The adjudication of this crime would lead to his death. The details of this murder are documented in Ramon Mundo Mendoza's autobiography, Mexican Mafia, The Gang of Gangs. After Mundo's return to San Quentin in 1973, he was approached on the B section yard by Louis Henry from San Diego and asked if a guy by the name of Eddie Lopez, aka Green Eyes, got into the clica. Mundo lied and told him he wasn't sure and asked Louis why. Louis told him that he and Green Eyes were crime partners in some armed robberies in Chula Vista, but once they were arrested, Green Eyes turned state's evidence against him in return for a lighter sentence. Mundo told him not to say anything and to provide him the court transcripts, which he was due to receive any day. Upon receipt of the transcripts, Louis' story was confirmed and Green Eye's fate was sealed. A simple message was sent out to the fellas on the main line reading thumbs down with Green Eyes. This came as a surprise because he was well liked by the brothers, having made a good impression during the following incident. On July the 22nd, 1972, at 12:20 p.m., only 3 days after Tarzan of the Nuestra Familia returned to San Quentin on a parole violation, he and Jack Rice were stabbed on the lower yard by Mexican Mafia carnales, Green Eyes, Rafa Mata, and Gabby Baeza, all from Florencia. Officers reported that Tarzan was bleeding from stab wounds and rushed to the hospital. Green Eyes was responsible for the damage inflicted on Tarzan, but the transcripts proved he was no good and had to go. Güero Shy, David Davy Perez from San Francisco, and Vincent Chente Gutierrez from East Los were given the assignment to take out Green Eyes. They lured him into the showers on the west end of the San Quentin gymnasium with the offer of shooting some carga. Güero Shy walked up behind Green Eyes and slipped a rope over his neck, strangling and preventing him from crying out. Next, Davy Perez, who had hidden a length of pipe in his waistband, bludgeoned Green Eyes over the head. And finally, Chente finished the job by stabbing him 4 times in the back. In the picture you are viewing, you can see Güero Shy in the upper right-hand corner, circled in blue, flashing the mano negra, and Green Eyes in the lower left-hand corner, circled in red. Like many other prison gang members, Güero Shy was unleashed to the streets with the passage of the Nedgley Bill, championed by California Senator John A. Nedgley, the chairman of the Select Committee on Penal Institutions. This bill did away with the indeterminate sentencing structure in most instances and replaced it with determinate or fixed sentences. As a result, the CDC began issuing RUAPs, release upon approval of parole plans. It didn't take long before Güero Shy was back on the hit detail. On February the 11th, 1977, Mexican Mafia member Bruno Chavez from the Avenues, who was also paroled due to the Nedgley Bill, was stabbed 12 times by Güero Shy and Alfie Sosa in Glassell Park, terminating his membership. Bruno, 29 at the time, was getting tired of all the killing and wanted to stop serving the Mexican Mafia and just kick back and enjoy his life. Of course, this was against the MS code of conduct that dictated that the only way out of the Mariposa was death. Unfortunately for Güero Shy, he would not enjoy his freedom much longer. On February the 20th, 1977, Officer Mike Delia performed a traffic stop on a 1975 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme containing Alfie Sosa and Armando Mundi Varela. Delia requested backup, and Robert Moco Murillo, also employed by Monterey Park PD and a member of the prison gang task force, responded. A 38 caliber revolver was found in the vehicle, and both Alfie and Mundi were arrested on suspicion of armed robbery. This weapon turned out to be the murder weapon used in the Sacramento Ellen Delia murder conducted by Alfie and Sailor Boy Gonzalez on February the 17th, 1977. Alfie quickly bailed out and fled to Tijuana, Mexico, but Mundi was not so lucky. Over nearly a 2-week period, Gilbert Avila, a Drug Enforcement Administration agent and head of the prison gang task force, with the help of Emma defector Carlos Paiface Ortega, managed to convince Mundi to defect from the Mexican Mafia. Mundi then began providing details on several Mafia executions. On March 3rd, 1977, as a result of the information provided by Mundi, 5 Mexican Mafia members and the sister of a Mexican Mafia member were arrested. Arrested were Michael Delia, Alberto Beto Valles, Manuel Rocky Luna, Edward Sailorboy Gonzalez, and Anita Talamantes, the sister of Luis Bala Talamantes. The 6th person arrested was Güero Shy, held on a parole violation because a .22 caliber gun was found in his possession at the time of his arrest. Sailor Boy was the next Mexican mafia member to defect. Sailor Boy testified before the Los Angeles grand jury detailing several murders. Unfortunately for Güero Shy, Sailor testified that the murder of Bruno Chavez was voted on by him and 11 other Mexican mafia members at the baptism of the daughter of fellow Mexican mafia member Steve Calote Amador in San Francisco on January the 30th, 1977. Sailor also testified that Bruno was killed for not wanting to participate in intimate business and that Alfie Sosa and Güero Shy were the brothers that conducted the murder on February the 11th, 1977. As a result, the grand jury indicted Alfie and Güero Shy of the Bruno Chavez murder on April the 21st, 1977. On May 12th, 1977, Alfie and Güero Shy were arraigned on murder charges and both entered not guilty pleas. They were ordered to be held without bail until the trial, which was set for July the 7th, 1977. With all the evidence against him, it was no surprise that Güero Shy was sent back to CDC for this murder. In the CDC, he met a young camarada by the name of Rene Boxer Enriquez from Artesia, and he, along with Danny Black Dan Barrela, began mentoring Boxer in preparation for his induction into the Mexican Mafia. The following description of Güero Shy is taken from Boxer's biography written by Chris Blatchford, The Black Hand. And then there was Raymond Güero Shy Shyrock, whose loyalty and enthusiasm for carrying out the most heinous of crimes had made him a Morgan favorite. A half a dozen years earlier, Güero Shy and 6 other mafiosos were arrested in connection with 10 murders. Boxer estimated, however, that Güero Shy is responsible for as many as 100 hits. Along with Morgan, Güero Shy was one of the few white guys in La M, and many felt that because of this, he killed more readily to prove his worth. In 1988, Güero Shy was back on Broadway as a result of a parole after serving about 11 years for the Bruno Chavez murder he committed alongside Alfie Sosa. But just like when he was paroled in the 1970s, it didn't take long for Güero Shy to be back on the hit detail. On October the 15th, 1988, the body of Mexican mafia member Jose Sluggo Piñera was found near the railroad tracks in Hazard Park, just outside the Ramona housing projects. The fatal wound was a jagged cut through the throat that ran from ear to ear. Piñera had also suffered multiple stab wounds to the chest, and defensive wounds showed he didn't go easy but put up a fight. According to Boxer, this murder was conducted by Güero Shy and an unidentified crime partner. Benjamin Topo Peters placed Piñera on the lista. He had arranged for Piñera to live with his mother upon his parole. Piñera and Topo's mother had some sort of falling out, and Topo felt severely disrespected after doing Piñera a favor. In 1993, following Peter Sano Ojeda's example in Orange County, the Mexican Mafia began a campaign to end drive-bys. This didn't mean they were ending the violence just yet, but changing the rules of engagement. Gang members with a beef against a rival were to do it face to face to avoid collateral damage in what was termed as walk-ups. The Mafia felt that if this effort was successful, they could control the gangs and then get them to do their dirty work. The next step was to have each gang designate a representative to communicate with the inmate. Shortly thereafter, the taxing of the gangs by the Mafia began. The photo you are viewing is from the meeting held at Elysian Park near Dodger Stadium on September the 18th, 1993. Outwardly, the Mexican Mafia propaganda served to the community was that they were trying to stop drive-bys to end gang violence. In 1995, Güero Shy and Chuco Castro met with a Long Beach newspaper reporter to try and convince him of the prison gang's good intentions. Güero Shy was heard on a recording that was made at the meeting saying, "I support ending the drive-bys to stop needless violence in parts of Los Angeles," and he even offered to go to schools to speak out against gang violence. Of course, this was all a front, but this didn't stop defense attorney J.T. Lickman from playing this tape at the 1997 RICO trial in an attempt to paint Güero Shy as a man against violence. But before we jump ahead, let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, the Maxim Road murders. On Saturday, April the 22nd, 1995, between 10 and 10:30 p.m., three adults, Anthony Dito Moreno, his sister Maria Moreno, and Gustavo Tito Aguirre, and two of Maria's children, 5-year-old Laura Moreno and 6-month-old Ambrose Padilla, were shot to death in a house located at 3843 Maxon Road in El Monte, California. Richard Primo Valdez, a Sangara Street member, shot and killed Anthony Moreno and Gustavo Aguirre, while his fellow Sangra gang member, Jimmy Character Palma, shot and killed Maria Moreno and her children. Sangra gang members Danny Tricky Logan and Anthony Scar Torres were also co-conspirators. The hit team was sent by Luis Pelon Maciel from El Monte Flores, who was a newly made Mexican mafia member sponsored by Güero Shai. Of course, Shai did not order nor expected the two children to be murdered. This was against the Mexican mafia's code of conduct. Jimmy Character Palma was murdered on Adjustment Center Yard 1 in San Quentin for his transgression in October of 1997. Pelon entered protective custody, fearing the same fate. The intended target was Anthony Dito Moreno, who was a Mexican mafia dropout that was collecting taxes from drug dealers in the name of the M. Güero Shai assigned this hit to his protege, Pelon Maciel. The picture you are viewing was taken in the mid 1970s in San Quentin. The three individuals in the front row flashing the mano negra are Emeros Benny Romero from Casablanca, Marcelo Gabi Baeza, aka Pistolero from Florencia, and Richard Richie Jaramillo from Pomona. The individual standing on the far right in the back row is a young Dito Moreno who was a camarada at this point of his career, being groomed for induction into the Mariposa. On November the 5th, 1993, Ernest Chuco Castro began to cooperate with law enforcement after he faced a long prison sentence as a result of a raid on his home. He worked for 2 years as an undercover informant, setting up meetings in different hotels and allowing law enforcement to record the meetings. For example, the induction of Luis Pelon Maciel and the politicking that took place beforehand regarding the issue of the books being closed was all captured on videotape. This led to a federal racketeering indictment that was unsealed on May the 1st, 1995. 22 Mexican mafia members and associates were charged with crimes ranging from murder, assaults, extortion, conspiracy, and narcotics trafficking. Unfortunately for 43-year-old Güero Shai, he was taken down in the dragnet the weekend before the indictment was unsealed. On May the 30th, 1997, Güero Shai was convicted of violations of RICO, conspiracy to violate RICO, conspiracy to aid distribution of drugs, guilty of murder of a Chino gang member, attempted murder of two other Chino gang members, and conspiracy to kill two LA gang members. Güero Shai is serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. He is currently housed at Victorville USP at the current age of 72. As I have said in other videos, there is no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow or retirement at the end of your career. Just a cement box or a hole 6 feet in the ground. Please take this into consideration before getting involved in that life. Good night and God bless.